I had been with Julian for 5 years. Everyone knew he adored me to the core. There was once a clueless shareholder at the company who got handsy with me while drunk. He was ruthlessly blacklisted by Julian. But now, in the middle of casual laughter and jokes, he treated me like a bargaining chip and handed me over to a rival. Because his true love had returned to the country. Chapter 1. President Coup. Are you really willing to part with her? When the man said that, I was still sitting beside Julian. Laughter echoed around us. Dazzling lights from the decadent party made my eyes sting. Julian's expression didn't change. He leaned lazily on the sofa, gently rubbing the plain ring on his fourth finger, smiling without saying a word. He didn't respond, but after being with him for so many years, I knew, since the moment I was brought up as part of the deal, I had already become a disposable pawn. Even though just an hour ago, he had pressed me against the mirror in the changing room, whispering baby with tenderness. I took a soft breath and sat up straight. After all, in this game, I had the least say. If President Coup can't bear to give her up, we could always trade for that plot in the east of the city. Of course, I'm just joking if it doesn't count. That's fine too. The atmosphere grew tense. I was the closest to Julian, so I could clearly sense the subtle shift in his mood. I watched as he slowly stopped what he was doing, lowered his leg from his knee, and sat upright. I knew he was angry. I don't say things I don't mean, he said. The crowd fell silent. The playful teasing stopped as the tension around the table thickened. Glances were exchanged, though everyone secretly doubted it. No one believed Julian would actually give me away. Everyone knew I was the woman he doted on for 5 years. But only I knew I was never the woman in his heart. That place belonged to his goddess, the one who left the country 6 years ago. And now, she was coming back. To say he was giving me away as a gift was just dressing it up. In truth, he was sending a message. It was time for me to bow out gracefully. I couldn't help but curl my fingers tight. There were so many ways he could have let me go. Yet Julian chose the most blunt, humiliating one. Or maybe, in his heart, I had never been anything more than something disposable, no different from a stray cat or dog. At that thought, a bitter laugh escaped me. It wasn't loud, but in the silence, it stood out. Only then did everyone really notice me, the person at the center of it all. Julian gave me a glance, his expression unreadable. Before he could speak, I slowly stood up. The gilded gown shimmered with my movement, every gesture a perfect display of elegance and allure. There was no denying my beauty. Otherwise, I wouldn't have lasted so long by Julian's side. Amid the startled stares, I gracefully walked to the man across from us. Leaning down, I hooked my arm around his shoulder and smiled with provocative charm. President Coup, I've stayed by your side all these years. If you want me to be with someone else now, well, that comes with a different price. Chapter 2. I had been with Julian since I was 18. A cliché story. An innocent girl who fell into the world of glamour and indulgence, only to be rescued by a rich savior who spent money like water. He pulled me out of the mud and kept me as his cherished, caged canary. For 5 years, many tried to copy the formula and sent women Julian's way, but none of them ever stayed, only me. At first, everyone bet on how long before he got tired of me. Later, they bet on when he'd finally marry me. But they all forgot one thing. Julian and I started with a transaction. So what true love were they talking about? When I returned to the villa, Julian was sitting on the sofa, a cigarette between his fingers. The ember glowed red in the dim light, flickering with every breath. His long legs were lazily draped over the coffee table. He looked every bit like a beast lurking in the dark. You shouldn't have come back, he said. He stood up and put out the cigarette. The room was silent, filled only with the faint scent of tobacco. It was a scent unique to Julian. Because of childhood trauma, I had a stress response to unfamiliar environments. When I first moved into the villa, I couldn't sleep at night unless Julian came home. I needed the comfort of his scent to feel safe. Back then, I was addicted to his tenderness too. I thought I was special, until the day I casually threw out the old, broken record player in the living room and got a storm of rage and a slap in the face in return. That was when I finally realized I was never special. Miss, why provoke him? That record player was a gift from Miss Liu, the housekeeper said while applying medicine to my cheek. That was also the moment I first heard about Emily. She and Julian had grown up together, childhood sweethearts, but the rush of a new romance made Emily impulsive. When she was 18, she left for love, ran off abroad to build a life with the man she loved. Since then, Julian had locked away his heart. And I was nothing but a stand-in who resembled Emily the most. Now that she was back, of course I had to leave. Snapping back to the present, I met Julian's gaze in the darkness, blinked once, and gave him a radiant smile. President Koo, I'm just here to pack up my things. You've been generous. You've given me a lot of expensive gifts over the years. I spoke as I walked upstairs, but the next second, a shadow loomed over me. In a flash, Julian pinned me against the wall, gripping my wrist tightly above my head. In the chaos, I heard him shout, "Camila, after all these years, is money all I ever meant to you?" I froze. What else could I care about? Your heart? That'd be suicide. My silence seemed to enrage Julian even more. He kissed me, harsh, punishing. I didn't resist, and when he finally pulled away, I looked up at him coolly and said, "President Koo, that's gonna cost extra." I raised my hand and gently wiped the red lipstick from the corner of his mouth with my fingertip. Speaking in a soft, lazy tone, the scent of tobacco still lingered on him, but this time, instead of calming me, it made me nauseous. Lowering my eyes, I pushed him away and pinched my thigh hard, forcing out 2 teardrops. "President Koo, Miss Liu is back. I came because I wanted to leave things on a good note. I took the breakup settlement, an absurd amount of money, and I went back to what I used to do." Zara was stunned. "You've got more than enough money now. Why come back to this place?" Zara was the one who brought me into the industry. To be more accurate, she was my savior. When my family couldn't afford the surgery and I couldn't even buy a meal with my student card, she lent me 10,000 yuan without hesitation so my mother wouldn't be thrown out of the hospital. She also introduced me to Julian, helped me escape that life in the fastest way possible. So now that she heard I was back, she thought I'd lost my mind. But I stayed. And before long, my name was everywhere. Chapter 3. Running into Julian again didn't surprise me. I walked in with a bottle of wine in hand. The room was full of familiar faces. I paused for only a second before putting on a graceful smile and elegantly taking my seat. "Good evening, President Koo." I greeted him calmly, but my seat was far from the head of the table, Julian's side, because he already had someone sitting next to him. Emily. I had never met her, but she was no stranger to me. There was a locked room in Julian's villa, filled with her photographs. I had caught a glimpse once by accident and laughed. The all-powerful heir of a powerful family. Julian had such a passionate, pure side. And now, the woman in those photos was sitting right next to him, holding onto his arm. She stared at me for a long while, then suddenly exclaimed with surprise, "Julian, she looks just like me." The room fell silent. My hand, mid-pour, paused as the golden champagne overflowed into the glass. Everyone present knew about my 5 years with Julian, but no one dared to bring it up. In the quiet, Julian finally spoke, his tone casual and indifferent. "How could she compare to you?" Clink. The sound of glass meeting the bottle. The champagne spilled slightly over the rim, just for a moment. Then I smoothly steadied the bottle and poured the drinks with practiced grace. By the time I sat back down, my face was composed, calm. "I have a common face," I joked, brushing it off lightly. Someone picked up the thread, and after a few more rounds of drinks, the topic was buried. But Emily, whether intentional or not, kept making passive-aggressive comments directed at me. "You look pretty young. Been in this business long? You really should go to school. Otherwise, you'll be stuck in this kind of toxic environment your whole life. A woman should be independent. Relying on men isn't a way out." I responded with smiles and polite banter, even though I could have told her I graduated from a top university, that if it weren't for my toxic family, I would have lived a normal campus life like any other girl my age. That for the past 5 years with Julian, being his caged canary had helped me save my mother's life. I had clawed my way out of a muddy life and found a path of survival. Julian didn't speak the entire time, but he stared at the man closest to me, watching how my head leaned slightly toward his chest, his expression growing darker by the second. Eventually, perhaps irritated, he lit a cigarette. only to have Emily snatch it away and put it out. "Julian, how many times have I told you? No smoking. It's bad for you." She scolded him with her hands on her hips. Unafraid, Julian just paused, then gave her a soft, indulgent smile, ruffling her hair and murmuring, "All right, TCH. I watched and couldn't help but reflect. I had once said something similar to him, long ago, but back then, I had only dared whisper it, cautiously." His cold stare froze me in place. He'd said, "Camila, you've crossed the line." A weight on my shoulder. One of the men beside me wrapped an arm around me and whispered teasingly in my ear, "I used to think Julian spoiled you. But now? Not so much. You should be with me instead." He grinned smugly. I narrowed my eyes. The smile on my face didn't reach my eyes. Then, bang! The weight vanished from my shoulder. I turned and saw Julian had slammed the man to the floor with one hand. His other fist landed brutally across the man's face. Chaos erupted in the private room. The commotion wasn't small. It didn't take long for the media to catch wind, the air of a wealthy family assaulting someone out of jealousy for his ex-lover. Once again, I found myself at the center of public scrutiny. When Zara returned after seeing the police out, I was leaning against the windowsill, smoking. Smoke curled around my expressionless face, reflected faintly in the glass, no longer the flirtatious charm of the past, but cold and untouchable like an aloof winter plum, still breathtakingly beautiful. The first time Zara saw me, she knew I was destined for something greater. There were plenty of young, pretty girls in this line of work, but few as clear-headed as I was. Master Ku didn't leave. "Camila, looks like your luck's come back. You're clever. Coming back here just got you back in Ku's favor. After what he did today, everyone knows you're the one he still cares about." Zara laughed with genuine joy. I knew she meant it, but I felt nothing. I exhaled a puff of smoke, then smiled, charming as ever. What a shame. I'm getting married. I had just stepped out of the club when Julian dragged me into his car. Before I knew it, I was pinned down in the back seat. My soft whimpers were swallowed by him, his breath hot with that familiar tobacco scent, surrounding me completely. It burned. It seduced. But just as quickly, he froze. He pulled back slightly, and I saw the blood on his lips, striking against his pale skin. I pushed him away, polite and composed. "President Ku, this isn't appropriate." I smoothed the folds of my dress, every emotion in place, perfectly handled. But my calm only made Julian angrier. He grabbed my jaw with 2 fingers, stroking my skin as he spoke, voice flat. "I've already given that land to Sam. I'll have the butler send your things back to the villa." Sam, the man I was supposed to marry. The same man Julian had handed me over to like a gift the last time. What a joke. He gave me away, now he wanted to take me back. I blinked slowly, smiling innocently. "President Ku, this isn't appropriate." The first inappropriate referred to our status. The second, to our relationship. Chapter 4. I didn't miss the scene from earlier, the chaos, the shouting, yet Julian still made sure to tell his men to get Emily out of there safely. Even in his rage, he never forgot his moon from the past. Men, they always want it all, never letting go of either side. Pathetic. I was Julian's canary once again, but this time, it was different. Before, I was the canary he openly showed off to the world. Now, I was more like a bitter, lonely woman guarding an empty home, waiting in silence, while the TV broadcasted his public displays of affection with Emily. At least he still paid generously. The maid tried to comfort me, worried I might be upset. "Miss Camila, you may not be able to compare with Miss Liu, but President Ku values old ties. He'll always make sure you have a place by his side." Even the help could see how much Emily meant to Julian. Yet Julian seemed to enjoy this 3-way circus without a care in the world. So naturally, when Emily and I finally crossed paths, the tension was explosive. It started off innocently enough. I was bored and decided to pick up a piece of jewelry Julian had custom ordered for me months ago. What I didn't expect was to find Emily already at the store, wearing my necklace, admiring herself in the mirror. A few socialites surrounded her, showering her with praise, completely ignoring the awkward look on the clerk's face as she stammered. This piece was actually pre-ordered by someone else. So what? One of the women scoffed. Emily is President Ku's favorite. If she wanted the moon, he'd probably find a way to get it for her. They didn't care. Emily looked hesitant, but her fingers lingered lovingly on the necklace, unable to let go. Then, the moment the store clerk spotted me and rushed over like a lifeline, Emily and her entourage turned to look at me. The air immediately turned icy, like a battlefield frozen in time. Emily's expression soured, especially when she heard the clerk say, "This necklace was custom-made by President Ku for Miss Camila months ago." The tension in the room dropped to absolute zero. Then someone scoffed with a mocking laugh. "Wearing feathers doesn't make you a phoenix. She really thinks she's something." Laughter erupted. In their circle, I had always been a nobody. They never saw me as one of them. Even their insults were bold and shameless. Then Emily spoke softly, in that gentle, unbothered tone. "Why don't you go home? I'll ask Julian to buy you another one." So condescending, so righteous. I looked at her delicate, untainted face and suddenly felt that Julian must have been blind. All those years of obsession, for this? She didn't look at me again. The others returned to chatting about how to style the necklace, as if I were already dismissed with a single sentence. Because in their eyes, I was just Julian's little plaything. None of them noticed me step forward until it was too late. I reached out and yanked the necklace right off Emily's neck. "No can do. This necklace is mine." Julian arrived shortly after. Even the roar of his engine outside sounded dangerous. As expected, when he stormed in, he didn't even bother taking off his shoes. He shoved past the pleading maids and charged toward me on the sofa. "Who gave you the right to lay a hand on Emily?" He reached for my throat, but froze midair when I looked up at him. His anger was replaced by stunned silence. Because I was crying. All these years with Julian, I had never cried. Not when he hit me in a fit of rage. Not when he gave me away like a pawn. Not even then. But now, with the broken necklace lying on the coffee table, I sat curled on the sofa, staring up at him. My eyes were red and swollen, tears welling but not falling. My lips were bitten, bruised and trembling, but stubbornly, I refused to let the tears fall. Julian seemed to calm a little. He pressed his lips together, his chest rising and falling rapidly. He sat beside me, voice still cold enough to freeze. "I always thought you were the sensible one. You were the sensible one. It's just a necklace. If you want one, I'll get you another. You shouldn't have fought with her over this." Fought? I almost laughed. "Julian, this was my birthday gift." My voice was hoarse, trembling. For a second, Julian's cold mask cracked. He looked at me, jaw unclenching slightly. I gave a bitter smile, my lips still trembling with pain. "You had it custom made just for me. Our initials are engraved on the back." Julian fell silent. He finally seemed to remember that this necklace, this gift, was something he gave me in a moment of passion, a reward for his affection. Now that he'd snapped out of it, an awkward look crept onto his face. "You shouldn't have hurt Emily, President Ku. I wanted to end things peacefully," I said calmly. "It was you who brought me back." I stood up and shoved the broken necklace into Julian's hand. A single tear slid perfectly from the corner of my eye, and I smiled, a bitter, self-mocking smile. "Julian, is it that someone like me just isn't worthy of loving you?" That tear landed squarely in Julian's heart. He looked stunned, as if the very idea that I loved him had never occurred to him before. But before he could process it, I followed up with something that shook him even more. "But if that's true, then why did you bring me back? Or, is it that even you don't know what you really feel?" Julian left. His steps were hurried, almost flustered. The second he was gone, I rushed into the bathroom and vomited until the world spun. The maid came over, concern written all over her face, words caught in her throat. "Don't worry," I said, catching my breath with a smile. "I'm not pregnant." I saw the worry in her eyes and reassured her. "I was just sick." From disgust, I pulled the tiny canister of tear gas from my pocket and tossed it into the toilet. As I stared at the water swirling it away, I thought about my little performance just now, so convincing even I almost believed it. My gaze turned sharp, mocking. After all, no man can truly resist the trap of playing hard to get. Chapter 5. Julian didn't come home for several days. There were no news headlines of him and Emily either, no flashy appearances, no public affection. The incident quietly faded into silence. Emily never came to confront me, but I had a feeling she wouldn't let things slide so easily. And sure enough, somehow, Emily found out which care facility my mother was staying in. She contacted the attending physician and demanded my mother's discharge. This nursing home is one of the top-rated in the country. She said with that ever-so-gentle tone, "Camila, your mother has shown no signs of waking up after all these years. It's not fair to keep occupying a bed and delaying someone else's treatment." She said it like she was doing everyone a favor. Standing beside her was a perfectly healthy caretaker, holding a set of patient clothes, ready to force my mother out and take her place. My mother had been hit by a car when she was 18. Left in a vegetative state, the driver fled the scene. After all these years, they were never found. The crushing medical bills had dragged me straight from heaven to hell, but I never gave up. I still believe, one day, she'll wake up, staring at Emily's radiant, angelic smile. I couldn't fake one of my own this time. My face went cold as I said to the doctor, "My mother is here because President Koo arranged it." This was the only nursing home in the city with a complete medical system. A single room was incredibly hard to get, and it cost a fortune to maintain. At the mention of Julian, Emily's expression faltered, and just then, Julian showed up. It had been a while. He looked the same as ever, composed and elegant. But when he arrived, he instinctively stood next to Emily. Still, when he looked at me, his expression was complicated. "What's going on?" he asked. The doctor quickly explained everything, then added, "President Koo, as you know, our rooms are always full. It was only out of respect for you that the director allowed us to keep that space open." "Julian," Emily chimed in, "Aunt Wang has been with me for many years. She's like a mother to me. I came back hoping to repay her kindness and arrange proper care for her. There are so many nursing homes in the city. Camila's mother has been lying there for years already. Does it really matter where she lies?" Anyone could see Emily was making things difficult on purpose. I stood in front of the room in silence, staring at Julian. His face darkened. People had started to gather in the hallway, whispering, speculating. Some gossiped. Others just watched curiously. But when someone finally muttered a complaint about Emily's cold-blooded behavior, she cracked. Tears welled up as she tugged at Julian's sleeve, her voice quivering. "Julian, am I making things harder for you? Was it a mistake for me to come back? Maybe nothing's the same anymore." That one sentence triggered his guilt. And so, in the end, he turned to me and said, "Camila, I'll find another nursing home for your mother." I froze. Even though I'd long grown used to Julian's cruelty, his decision still sent a chill through my entire body. The white fluorescent lights above burned into my eyes, gripping my hand until my knuckles turned white. I forced myself to speak, each word broken, uneven, trembling. "Julian, how can you treat me like this?" I had no choice but to cooperate. Julian's word carried weight. If I stood in his way, the one who'd suffer wouldn't be him, but my unconscious, bedridden mother. And he did find another facility, one with equally good conditions, and transferred my mother there at top speed. But unfortunately, just a few days later, the news came: my mother had passed away. I handled the funeral arrangements alone. Julian showed up at the memorial hall with Emily to apologize. She wore the gemstone necklace Julian had once given me. Before either of them could speak, I raised my hand and slapped Julian across the face. "Get out! Don't dirty this place!" Emily let out a sharp scream and instinctively raised her hand to strike back, but Julian held her back. "How could you hit her? Life and death are fate. Have you ever thought?" She continued self-righteously. "Maybe your mother didn't want to keep suffering like that. Maybe this was her release." I'd had enough, so I slapped her too. Julian's face darkened with fury. He grabbed my wrist. Hard, but I didn't fight. I didn't scream. I simply stared at him. The coldness in my eyes cut straight through him. For the first time ever, Julian looked lost. More than that, panicked. The rebuke he'd prepared melted into nervous consolation. "Camila, don't worry. I'll make sure your mother has the most dignified funeral, something worthy of her." I laughed. I shook off his hand, pointed to the door, and said, "Julian, thank you for all your financial support, but this is over. From now on, stick to Emily. Don't come near me again." Julian started spiraling, lavishing me with money, handbags, jewelry, dragging me to events again, reclaiming me as if I were some prize, even when Emily was present. He no longer tried to hide it. I watched with my own eyes as Emily broke down in front of him more than once, tears streaming, eyes swollen. She clung to him and cried, "What am I to you, Julian?" Julian stood silent, letting her cry in his arms, his eyes full of confusion and guilt. And that was always when I appeared. The moment he saw me, it was like a cheating husband getting caught. He almost instinctively pushed Emily away. When he looked at me, there was nothing but guilt in his eyes. He tried to explain, but I simply walked past them in silence, calm and composed. That night, Julian came back drunk, completely wasted. He hugged me and begged, slurring, "What do I have to do to get us back to how we were?" I handed him a glass of honey water, just like I used to, but when I finally spoke, it was to ask him what date would be convenient for me to move out, and then I saw Julian's eyes turn red. Chapter 6. You're very clever. Emily finally couldn't hold back and came to confront me. Gone was her usual soft, serene demeanor. When she looked at me, her eyes were filled with thinly veiled disgust. She sat down on the sofa with an air of superiority and got straight to the point. 5 million. Leave Julian. You know it too. Julian's only interested in you because you're a novelty. I'm the woman he could never have otherwise. Why do you think he handed you over to someone else the moment I came back? I said nothing, just stared at the check she held out. I didn't take it. Instead, I asked her one question. Do you love Julian? Emily froze. Then, I answered for her. You don't. You just see him as something that belongs to you. If you really loved him, you wouldn't have disappeared for 6 years with no word. You didn't come back because of Julian. You came back because I'm standing beside him now. Her face changed, furious, humiliated. She jumped up and raised her hand to slap me. So what? Julian was supposed to wait for me. So that's why you gave him a convenient excuse to run away for love all those years ago. You disappeared overseas, living it up like nothing mattered, treating Julian as your backup plan the whole time. You came back because you got caught doing drugs, throwing orgies, hospitalized after a miscarriage, had your uterus removed. It was a scandal. The Liu family forced you to come back, didn't they? I dodged her swing easily. Every word I spoke hit its mark. Emily Liu's face turned a sickly red. It was the look of someone whose deepest secrets had just been dragged into the light. She lunged again, hands clawing, trying to tear at my face. Shut up! How do you know all this? I swear, if you tell Julian, I won't let you off. She kept missing, and then she snapped completely. I'm telling you, even so, Julian still loves me. He'll marry me. You're just trash, meant to crawl back into the mud you came from. I stared at her wild, unraveling expression, and just as she lunged at me again, I raised a hand, slowly, and pointed behind her. Why don't you ask Julian yourself? Behind her stood Julian. God knows how long he'd been there. Chapter 7. Julian and Emily broke things off. What I told him may have been secret, but for someone like Julian, finding out the truth was child's play. And it was the truth. Emily screamed, cried, pleaded, said she was just young and stupid. But in Julian's mind, the goddess he once placed on a pedestal was now irrevocably broken. When Julian loves someone, he gives them the whole world. When he doesn't, he takes it all back. The Liu family had long relied on the Ku family's power to stay afloat. Without Julian, they quickly found themselves suffocating in the city's business circles. Emily begged, pleaded, waited for him at his door in the rain, but Julian never let her in. And me? I wore that custom-designed gemstone necklace, the one he made for me, and accompanied Julian to his grand 30th birthday gala. That night, in front of everyone, he proposed to me, and I said yes. Later, Zara praised me. You're smart. People move forward. Sure, President Ku was blind for a while, but now, he's fully devoted to you. Don't make life harder for yourself. I knew what she meant. She was talking about my mother, telling me to let it go. But unfortunately, some things are checkmates. There's no way out. Chapter 8. Our wedding was nothing short of grand. Julian spared no expense. The media swarmed the venue. Guests arrived in endless streams. The dress I wore was identical to the one worn by the Princess of England, and the jewelry on me could have belonged in a museum. But as I walked down the aisle, I walked alone. During the vows, he held my hand, eyes soft with love, his voice full of solemn promise. He said this love would never end. I smiled, staring at the impossibly handsome face before me, surrounded by an ocean of roses. I slowly slipped my hand from his. Then, as I tilted my head up, the smile on my face began to fade, and I mouthed, wordlessly, goodbye. Julian was taken away by the police, charged with financial crimes. The evidence? Hidden inside the custom gemstone necklace around my neck, a recording device. The crowd erupted. No one could have predicted that the bride would betray the groom at the altar, hand him over with her own 2 hands. I said nothing, just quietly lifted my veil and walked away from the most romantic wedding the city had ever seen. Outside, a black van waited at the curb. I opened the door and climbed in. A man in black handed me a folder. Your passport and new ID are ready. Your mother's already been moved to a care facility in Sweden. You'll be flying out in a few days. So, you've really decided, you're never coming back? His tone was teasing, rubbing his chin with a smirk. I thought you'd be more attached to the title Mrs. Koo. After all, if you really married my cousin, and once he took down the Koo family's current head, you'd be the matriarch yourself. You really don't want that? He raised an eyebrow. I looked up, calm as ever. I don't make promises I won't keep. He chuckled. But what if my cousin hadn't been able to give you up? What if he traded that piece of land to keep you by his side? Yes, it had all been Oscar's game. My mother had never died. The goal from the beginning was that land. If that had happened, I said coldly, our plan would have moved even faster. Oscar Koo raised a brow higher, leaning back lazily, one leg crossed over the other, lips twitching into a grin. Lucky for you. You chose my cousin and not me. In a family like the Koos, sibling rivalry wasn't rare. Especially between Julian and his cousin Oscar, it had reached a fever pitch. And now, I just stabbed Julian in the back at the worst possible moment, practically delivering the family throne to Oscar on a silver platter. I was the one who approached him 3 years ago. All this, because of a slap? Because of Emily? 3 years ago, I realized I was just Emily's substitute. Oscar stared at me like I was incomprehensible. I took the folder, calm as ever, half and half. The moment I found out I was a stand-in, I got curious about Emily and what I found out. I looked up, my eyes unwavering. In truth, Emily didn't leave the country on a whim. She was involved in a hit-and-run. Oscar froze, thought for a moment, then realization dawned. Your mother. 6 years ago, she was high and speeding. She hit my mother and didn't stop. She ran her over and fled. Later, she was shipped overseas to avoid the fallout. I never expected that the person I'd been searching for all these years, the person who destroyed my life, was Emily. The bitter irony? Julian helped cover it up. So for 5 years, Julian kept my mother alive with one hand and shielded Emily with the other. The moment I learned the truth, I vowed to take them both down. I approached Oscar, uncovered the scandalous life Emily lived abroad, used it to force her return. From the second her feet touched home soil, she and Julian were dancing to my plan. Oscar stared at me for a long time, then finally muttered under his breath, my cousin always did fall hardest for women. I arched a brow and replied casually, empires don't fall because of women. They fall because of the men who lose their heads for them. Chapter 9. A family like the Koos would never allow a blemish on its name. Eventually, Julian was released on bail, but he was completely removed from the center of power. He was, in effect, exiled. I heard that Julian was looking for me. Zara said that after wreaking havoc at the club, the Koo family had finally had enough of his antics. They sent someone to haul him away and lock him in a villa. Yet it wasn't long before, after a few days of supposed calm, he suffered a bleeding ulcer from his drinking at home and was rushed to the hospital overnight. No sooner had he been discharged than Emily appeared and stabbed him. He was immediately taken into surgery, had one kidney removed, and then remained in the ICU for 3 days. Emily Liu, ruined by the collapse of the Liu family, had fallen from grace to that of a street rat. Then, as if that weren't enough, An anonymous tip-off, accusing her of a hit-and-run while high on drugs and speeding, led to her arrest. When tested on the spot, her guilt was exposed, and she was thrown into a rehabilitation facility. There, she endured relentless torment. After much brooding, she concluded that this was all Julian's revenge. Finally free, the very first thing she did was retaliate. She camped out at the hospital entrance for days until she finally seized the opportunity and, without a moment's hesitation, stabbed Julian repeatedly. When Julian awoke from surgery, he pressed charges against Emily without relenting. The fate of those once regarded as the golden couple turned out to be profoundly tragic. That was Zara's lament to me over the phone. At that time, I was sitting by my mother's bedside, reading the newspaper to her. The doctor had mentioned that a certain level of auditory stimulation could awaken a patient's will to live. I smiled and replied, "Who says otherwise?" Then I hung up the phone. Outside the window, the Alps stretched out in lush, verdant splendor, a view that lifted the spirits. Just then, the doctor walked in, a handsome Swedish young man with exotic features, his warm and gentle smile as he greeted us and began his routine examination of the patients. I resumed reading the paper, but a moment later, I heard him gasp in surprise. I looked up to see my mother slowly opening her eyes. In that instant, my world was illuminated once again. Years later, I accompanied my mother back to our homeland to visit her grave. Over the years, I had always arranged for Zara to have someone tend the grave, but as my mother grew older and after her long travels abroad, she insisted on returning to see her roots. Everything in the country had changed dramatically. During that period, I went back to the club and met with Zara. She hadn't changed much, after all. She had purchased the club with the money I'd given her, and over the years, its success had ensured that I, as the unseen shareholder, received handsome dividends annually. Yet, she shared a piece of gossip with me. Emily had turned to the streets. After being detained for several years and then released, with the Liu family gone and with nowhere left to turn, she was forced into the sex trade. It's all about appearance. Zara sneered dismissively. They say all it takes is money. In this circle, while some actions may be forced, willingly sinking into depravity is something no one respects. I listened without much emotion. After exchanging a few more words, I left. Unexpectedly, at the door I encountered a familiar face, Julian. He had aged considerably, though still dressed in the latest high-end designer suits. The air of nobility he once exuded had vanished. Standing amid the crowd, he no longer looked glamorous. He looked at me, not with hatred, but with an unmistakable, almost desperate adoration. He approached and said, "I do not hate you. All these years, I've been waiting for you." Just two short sentences stirred emotions in me that I had long kept at bay. That surge of revulsion, so intense it made me instinctively step back, forced a wry smile as I replied, "Julian, I didn't come back to this country so you could wait for me." I saw the pain in his eyes. He wanted to reach out and touch me, but then hesitated and withdrew his hand. At that moment, a tall figure appeared beside me and draped an arm around me. In halting, accented speech he said, "Cammy, I'm here to pick you up. Your mom, wait for you to go drink." Who is he? The once handsome Swedish doctor is now my husband. Listening to his awkward words, I couldn't help but laugh. "It's eat a meal, not drink," I corrected. Glancing sideways, I caught sight of Julian's pale, almost translucent face as he stood there, brushing past him with the cool indifference of a gentle breeze. I said softly, "I don't know him, he's probably just waiting for someone." Some people are destined to wait their entire lives, and destined never to find anyone.